Let's call this meeting to order. Erica, would you take a roll call for us?
I sure will. Okay, so we have Cameron Grant, Jean Christopher, Tom DeBee, Arlene Zortman, and it looks like we don't have Lauren Kelly. And then staff, we have Harold Dominguez, Karen Roney, Lisa Galliner, Kendra Daniels, and Molly O'Donnell just joined the meeting. And we are only missing Kathy Fedler.
So we'll consider the meeting open. Let's roll out to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes from our November 16th meeting. Those are in your packet. We have a motion to approve or any comments regarding adjustments to those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Arlene and a second by Tom. Jean, I saw you raise your hand. Is there any discussion?
Second.
Oh,
I was just going to second. Yeah.
great. All in favor, thumbs up. Motion carries. We'll roll on to item number 3, which is public invited to be heard. Erica, do we have anybody that has asked to speak with the advisory board today?
We do not.
All right, well then we will move on from item number 3 to new and old business. Item number 4A is review and input on the proposed LHA goals and objectives and specific action steps. And I believe those are in our packet as a refresher. Is there someone on staff, maybe Karen, who wants to take the lead on this?
I will check in with Harold. I'm prepared to go unless you want to make any introductions.
Yeah, you can go ahead and go.
Okay. Well, great. Good morning, everyone. You've seen these before, but we have added some meat to the bones, and we'll be taking these back to the LHA Board of Commissioners. I imagine at their January meeting. So we wanted to give you one last opportunity to review these, provide any input. There are a couple of areas where we still have to be determined. And so anyhow, we just wanted to let you know what we had on our minds in terms of taking these goals and moving them into action. So Cameron, I think it would be up to you as the chair. I can certainly walk through all of these, or maybe we just open them up section by section. And if the advisory board has any comments, or if we want to make any comments to staff, we can do it that way.
I think that second option is the best. We've been through these a few times.
Right.
Maybe why don't we look at each section, if there are any highlights
Okay.
about things that have changed since the last time we reviewed these, maybe touch on that, and then we'll just field any feedback that we have. So why don't you run that, Karen?
Okay, that sounds
Start
great.
at the top.
So so in the first, which is kind of the overarching goal, was, really is about us making sure that we are staying on top of what are the housing needs in in our Longmont community. I will comment on the first action step, which is about a planning grant that staff submitted to DOLA. We did receive notice last week, I believe, that we did receive that planning grant. Yay! So so anyhow, so Molly O'Donnell from our staff will be working with one of our planning staff members to to really carry that out. And I don't know, Molly, if you have any other comments to make about the planning grant at this point in time.
Just that we're planning for the grant to go to City Council on January 25th to be approved. And then we're getting kicked off as soon as the new year starts. So we're gonna start setting a plan for first steps.
Great. Thanks, Molly.
Mhm.
So I'm going to move on to the Housing Choice Voucher Program unless there are other questions from the advisory board.
I did have a question on, so will the grant cover the whole costs then of the research and the, I guess, whatever?
Will it get us everything we
Demographics.
need? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know, Molly, do you want to take a stab at that? 'Cause
Sure,
we we have
we-
steps in there for other resources should we need them, but go ahead.
Right. So the grant was for, I think our total cost was 82,000, I want to say, but I'd have to pull that up to get the exact number. And so we're going to have to procure the consultant to perform the work. So we have to see how those bids come in. But we did estimate that the amount we requested would cover what we want, and we were granted that full amount. So.
And then the other question I had too was just how is this different than the other, I guess it was more like countywide or regional. How is this different than what was done back then? And it was probably 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, so the data was collected countywide for the consolidated plan.
Mhm.
And there is some Longmont specific data in there, but not as much as we're looking for this effort. And this effort also is going to include kind of a housing stock inventory, including attainable, the housing in the attainable realm. Any other questions?
Okay, so I will move on to the Housing Choice Voucher Program section. And, you know, again, I think most of, as you see, the objectives are really around making sure that we get a handle on that 2-year tool that really helps us to optimize the budget that we have available and making sure that we're issuing the maximum amount of vouchers that the budget supports without going over. So getting a great handle on that, and then we have objectives in there for staff to begin to explore other possible sources of vouchers. So you'll see that we have the Veterans Affairs supportive housing vouchers, maybe to explore the move to work vouchers. So we will be looking at how to add different types of vouchers to our portfolio of vouchers, in addition to maximizing the amount that we do have available to us, that then puts us in line with HUD for a budget increase for our tenant-based vouchers. So kind of two prongs in that in that arena. We also have an action step that is about implementing the vouchers that are actually being funded by the City of Longmont. We do have that agreement in order. We have started to identify individuals who have previously been experiencing homelessness and are ready to exit into housing. And so we have 5 applicants, if you will, that are being assessed for 2 open spots at Briarwood. Eventually, we hope to fill the 7 vouchers that would be 7 units that would be available at Briarwood with these locally funded vouchers that the City of Longmont is funding, as well as additional placements with private property owners. So we have kicked that off, and then you can see in terms of the outputs or the outcomes, we think that 420 vouchers is kind of the sweet spot for our current budget authority. So we are working to achieve that as our target number of vouchers to issue with our current budget authorization.
Mhm.
Any?
Karen? Yeah, I have a question about the city funded vouchers.
Yes,
Is that the same as or related to HOME?
it is not.
It's different.
It's different. So these are
Okay.
dollars that come right out of the city's general fund. Those-
Okay.
That's not the home allocation that the city has.
Okay, all right, so this is a,
These are new.
an addition.
Yes, these are
Okay,
new,
great.
new
Okay.
opportunities. And we did increase that budget amount for 2022. So I think right now we estimate that we would probably be able to issue 12 vouchers, and we're looking to up that to 15 in 2022.
Great.
And then just continuing to look for opportunities for being able to dedicate or issue project-based vouchers for other developments. Part of that is, you know, we are having conversations with other partners in Boulder County around advocating with the State Division of Housing about broadening the Boulder County number of Boulder County entities that can issue, that can manage and administer project-based vouchers that are issued through the state. Right now, there's only one partner that can do that, and that is Mental Health Partners. And so we are, Longmont and other entities throughout Boulder County are really interested in the Division of Housing opening up that opportunity so other entities can issue and administer vouchers associated with projects funded by the state. So I don't know if there are any other questions about the Housing Choice Voucher Program goals and objectives.
Karen,
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. On number 3, when you talk about starting conversations with the medical centers in Denver and Cheyenne, is that in regard to transportation to those facilities, or is that in regard to identification of potential residents who might need housing?
I believe it is actually the VA centers. So either Denver or Cheyenne have to approve. So if Longmont says Longmont Housing Authority wants to put our hat in the ring to be granted additional vouchers, the VA medical centers have to approve our application and their willingness to support that. So it's really, it's an approval process.
Okay, thank you.
So Karen, the way I think the way I understand it also is if we want to have the veterans vouchers for veterans who live locally, they have to approve our application.
Right. They have to, they're part of the application process, right?
So
Exactly.
it's for local veterans, and I think eventually it ties into maybe some work with the Veterans Community Project as we look at sort of transitioning folks from homelessness into housing too.
But if they don't put their approval in the hopper, then we stop. So we tried this earlier this year, and we're not successful. But we want to continue to develop that opportunity.
So what do
As a
you
side
think?
note,
What do you think your chances are?
I don't have a very good answer with that. Unless Harold, you do. I think we just want to continue to pursue it for sure.
Okay.
you know, as a side note, Karen, what we may want to do is ping our friends in our facility and see if they can help facilitate that conversation, because I know they carry a lot of they're carrying a lot of weight now with the VA.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll be a dog with a bone. So,
And then I
Because-
just had a point of clarification. We're just seeking housing choice vouchers that are more of a long-term solution and not the short-term solution that I think like kind of the CARES Act was putting out there, correct?
right. These would be ongoing mental assistance. You bet.
And I'll take the next one, Karen.
Yep. You bet.
So in the rental housing development, you see that establish a plan to implement implement a plan to develop 6 new affordable housing units. Specifically, when we go down to the action steps, this is why we're bringing this to you all too, is because we're going to present our ARPA recommendations to the council on January 11th, which is what you really see in the action steps. And so when you look at step 1, invest 1.3 million funding into Sunset Heights permanent supportive housing development. Well, we've really allocated that there. As you all know, our partner Element submitted an application for the competitive 9% tax credits this year, and they didn't get it. They're going to resubmit that in February. And if they're not able to get it, what we're hoping to do then is with the 1.3 million, really have them go in the 4% non-competitive tax credits. And then we'll use the 1.3 million to bridge the gap. So it'll financially look like a 9% tax credit program. 800,000 for the Crispin 2 multifamily units. We had a meeting last week, right, Molly? And so some things that are happening on Crispin 2 right now that tie to this is because the IRS has not issued their final rules on income averaging. Lenders are not open to that approach right now because they're uncertain as to what the IRS is going to do. So we did work with CHAFA and Department of Housing, and they are open to allowing us to go into a traditional 60% kind of development project with the caveat of if the IRS issues rules for income averaging, that we'll transition into that. And that's important because of that changes the gap. So right now, because of commodity pricing and basically what we're finding in every project that's construction related, we had about an $800,000 gap that needed to be filled for the development of that project. It appears now, based on the 60% component, that may have been reduced to, we think we're going to be in around the $500,000 range. So we're really just using those ARPA funds to bridge the gap that's created by supply chain and commodity pricing issues for us. And so then when you look at the LHA owned property for family housing, that is on the Hover property. So we're looking at putting 1.3 million in. So when we come in with the value of the land in 1.3 million, we think finding a development partner is going to be much easier. Again, taking the same financing approach that was utilized on Crispin 2. Specifically on that, and Molly and I need to get together on this. We need to reach out to Indy Dwell, the guy we met, so we can start having those conversations. One of the other thing is seed money, 1.7 million for a public-private partnership to develop affordable assisted living units. You know, we've kind of talked, actually had a conversation with the Department of Housing. I forgot her name. Do you remember her name, Karen? Anyway, so when we were working on some of the comments that we received on the element.
Was it Kristen? Kristen Toombs?
Yeah, it was Kristen Toombs. When we were dealing with some of the comments on the element project, she and I had a conversation. I think everybody knows we need this. We just, no one knows quite how to get at it. And so we figured we would put an earmark for some funding for assisted living, affordable assisted living. If you really look at our properties that we manage, we do have folks that really should not be in independent living. And but there's no affordable option for them. And so, you know, what we're hoping to look at, the Loveland Housing Authority did something in a greenhouse concept that is similar to what you will see off of Hover, what is it? Off of Hover and the Hover.
Off of Hover and Mountain View, Hover and 15th.
And there's a greenhouse concept that they built that, you know, we're looking to Loveland to see what they did, but seed money for that. Also investing a portion of 1.5 million rental housing that we can manage as mixed income, and then 1.5 million to transit oriented development. I think I missed one in here. Oh, that's a Project Mustang. And then 1.5 million in First and Main. And then there's also 1.5 million that we're looking at. It's not on this list, but that we're looking at and for purchasing property as well. Specifically, the city owns what used to be the Royal Mobile Home Park. And we purchased that with our stormwater fund in order to do the stormwater work. We've completed that. And so if we could take the 1.5 million and 6, and also the a portion of the 1.5 million that I just mentioned, we would then acquire that for affordable housing development in that location. So you can kind of see what we're looking at in terms of units below that, but really taking a lot of the ARPA funds to come in and really have transformational change within our community. If you know, it's not just the ARPA funds. In order to hit all of these, we're using about 8.9 million of ARPA funds, and then about 3 million of the city affordable housing to look at a total of about $11 million in the next 4 years into affordable housing development.
Harold, on First and Main, just to give me some sort of an idea of kind of where this is at in my mind, where is this going to be compared to what I call the turkey factory places?
Yeah. So initially, and let me pull up Google Maps. So initially, I put this as First and Main because we're looking at a transit-oriented development associated with the transit station. And so we wanted to maximize affordable housing in that. Part of what was happening is in order to, we're going to have to utilize it in the area. And so they started talking about what can we do to maximize it. So let me share my screen. So the First and Main transit area is generally here in this area. We were looking at putting.
No, we're not seeing it. We're just seeing your
map
home screen.
You know what? I think something's happening with Zoom because it did this last night. Can you see it now?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, turkey plant for South Main State. The transit center, we're looking at a transit-oriented development here. To put it in perspective of what we've done, so we've allocated in total. RTD has about $17 million. We have about 4.4 that we're putting in locally, plus work on a grant that we received in transit funds to finish Kaufman Street.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to put 1.5 million into this. This property is something that we've been looking at here. This is the old Royal Mobile Home Park. And really it's moving the 1.5 we had plugged in here to this location, plus an additional 1.5 to purchase this from the stormwater fund so that we can then look at the development of affordable housing here connected with and how we can work in a partnership and sort of a master development concept with the First and Main station. So the property that we're really talking about is this piece here.
So do you have to buy any of the buildings that are over there or the businesses?
No, so we would just look at buying what the city owns in this here. Now for the transit station, yes, obviously that's a much bigger conversation with RTD and our other partners.
Do we know what RTD's plan is for transit at First and Main? Like what their timeline is?
So, you know, one of the things that we're waiting on in this location is the floodplain, and that's part of the Resilient St. Vrain project that we're working on. So we just submitted, let me share the screen again with you all. So we have just put in information on our Clomar for this area here with FEMA, and that really is what's mapping the floodplain. So we're waiting to see that. So that's a piece that actually impacts this here, believe it or not, because of if you breach here, then it, depending on capacity here, it actually moves this way and then floods this way. So we're working on that. RTD just approved moving forward and signing the agreement with Longmont on the development of that. So acquiring property, submitting, so we're probably looking at 3-ish years
Okay.
for the development, but also finding a development partner to look at more of a mixed use, transit oriented development is going to be in the mix as well. Primarily that'll move the transit station from Roosevelt Park to this location. And then also having capacity if they ever build Northwest Rail so that we can have a rail connection at this location. So I would say 3 to 4 years, probably realistically.
And I had one more quick question. When you were talking about funding and all the ARPA funding, you had mentioned that Element was going to go for the round 1 9% in 2022. Do you know if they're also pursuing the new gap funding that DOH is providing?
I'm not sure on that one.
Are you guys aware of that gap funding?
Molly, are you?
Can you be more, not their PAB funding, correct?
No, this is tax credit enhanced DOH gap funding. It's additional money that's going to be, that you apply for at the same time as your 9%. It's sort of like a dual application, and then they'll announce it. They'll award it in June next year. But you can get, there's $50 million available, and you can get 55,000 per unit in the metro area, 65,000 per unit in the rural area, and 75,000 per unit for permanently supportive housing. And it's all through DOH.
Okay.
Sort of.
I do have some updates from DOH with a list of things to look into, and I bet you that was on there. So
yeah, and the reason I wanted to bring it up because of Element is that the letter of intent is due in 7 days. I can send you, Molly, this document that I got from a listening session.
Okay, great.
And you guys can forward it to Element, because I don't know if they would have been aware of this, but this is a great opportunity for them as well.
That's wonderful. Thanks. Please send my way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren. That's great.
Thank you.
Great information.
Probably similar to what they did with DR funding, Molly, where they leveraged the two with each other. So. One of us will call Element today, or somebody will, let's say. Now, so what happens is, to Lauren's point, so then if, for example, they do get the 9% tax credits, or they get this, then what we'll do is look at shifting that 1.3 million probably then more into the mixed income, or the Costco owned property, the 9 acres that we're purchasing, so that we can facilitate that development and or leverage it on other projects, because the value of bringing property to the table for affordable housing development starts shifting the economics pretty quick. And so most of these numbers are going to have to be, these numbers will flex based on how deals are coming together, and we're just going to keep trying to roll to maximize what we can do to get more affordable housing units.
So I just want to chime in, and thank Harold. He just got done saying that we have, we are looking at about $11 million investments in this goal that the Housing Authority you know, identified in terms of bringing more units on. I just think it's very exciting. So, so I hope the advisory board does too. Because I just think we have this opportunity, and you know, and I think Harold has really stepped up. If we're talking about, you know, his recommendation of almost $9 million of the allocation that the city of Longmont is getting directly, which was just under 13. It's a pretty significant investment into this affordable housing goal and in what our community needs. So I just want to thank you, Harold. So it's very exciting, very exciting.
Okay, Harold, I'm gonna confirm what Karen said, but then I have a question.
Yep.
In that section, there is a statement to implement a plan to preserve 200 existing affordable housing communities.
Yeah, so I think part of that is, going back to that conversation, is when we have like an affordable housing community that's Thistle owned or some other, is that what we were talking about, Molly?
Well, part of it is Village
ahead.
Place,
Okay.
Hearthstone and Lodge, yeah, re-syndication.
So,
That's, yeah, so that helps too. So part of what we do is we do facilitate. So recently, Thistle came in for another project. I think that's off of, it's just off of North Main Street, behind the Ace Hardware where they rehab. So we assisted in some of those.
yeah, okay,
But then the other piece is really the re-syndication of Village Place, the conversion of the Hearthstone and Lodge from a 202 property to one that's a project-based voucher location,
Okay.
preserving those units.
Yeah, my question was, we have 200 communities,
I think it's 200 units.
units,
Mhm.
okay. Well, it was the communities that kind of threw me, because okay, so there are 200 units that we're moving to get, okay, I got it.
That's a great point. We'll change that verbiage.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I figured we got 100,000 people and, yeah, 200 communities. All
yeah.
righty,
Very good point, Jean. We'll change
Okay.
that up.
all right.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to stretch those ARPA funds just a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And
Hey,
I think that,
this is awesome to see. I really like this. Do we have to, or does the city have to spend the ARPA funds by a certain time? Do they expire?
yeah, help me with this, Molly. I think it's 4 years, but you can get extensions to 6 or 5.
It is 4 years. And I don't think we know about the extensions yet. If it's anything like any other federal funding, there's extensions end up happening, but.
So that's why you see a lot of this where you see the leverage into the land. So like the 1.5 million into Project Mustang, specifically, we're using that to pay for the land. Well, and this is kind of how it works to explain it. So when we went in that deal, the ability to buy the affordable housing land, 9 acres in that it was a great opportunity, great deal. Reggie Golden really worked well with us on that project, and allowing us to get 9 acres at that price is huge for our community. So if you ever run into Reggie, say thank you, because you can't find land at that cost. And so we were going to actually issue a loan out of our fleet fund and repay it back out of our the $1 million we put in the affordable housing fund annually. What ARPA is giving us the ability to do is basically cash fund that. And so that's how you're seeing us move with this money coming in. Well, what that does is boom, it's spent, it's out, we meet the requirement, and now we're leveraging the land for the development piece of the project, because it's such a huge chunk when we partner on affordable housing. So you're going to see that in a lot of cases. And then you know, the ones where we have to build the projects, Chrisman, Sunset Heights, they're pretty close and the design's ready to go, so you're not waiting on that. And then the Hover property, it's development ready, so it's really just construction plans that you're looking at. And so when you have to put it in actual construction, making sure you can meet that timeline. So that's kind of the thought process we have to go through on this to make sure we're meeting those deadlines. And also then leveraging what Lauren, there's a lot of money moving through right now. And it's really finding what can you leverage. And so you can start layering on top of what we're putting in to build a more robust public component of the capital stack, which maximizes your opportunities on the private development side. And so it's been a great experience for me. I'm now in the development world, development conversations, and it creates some consternation in the organization because we're pushing projects through our development review team, of which, you know, literally we hardwalled it. And so Joni's taking that side of it for me, and I'm taking the development side to make sure we're not having conflict of interest in this. And so I learned a lot in the process too.
And I had one more thing I wanted to mention. Who at LHA and then at the city is involved in the Boulder County Regional Housing Partnership? Like the boots on the ground work that's happening.
Many of us,
Any of you? Okay. 'Cause
many, Molly, Karen, Kathy,
Okay.
are all in Longmont representatives on the
Okay.
Regional Housing Partnership. Molly also just got appointed to be part of the county's ARPA investment process for we call it the affordable housing bucket. So Molly just got appointed to that because that was one of the strategies for the Regional Housing Partnership, to make sure we had that we had our hats in the various rings to be able to help influence how those county dollars are invested. So Molly's on in the affordable housing bucket for the county
Great,
ARPA
'cause
dollars.
Me and my coworker Molly, who are developers here at BCHA, are starting to talk to our strategic communications group about our lofty goal. And I say lofty because it's really going to be difficult, but I think it's worth a lot of time and effort and maybe even some ARPA money to put towards it. And so I would love to talk to you guys in a side conversation about it. But what we would like to do is start to market to the various regions and cities and municipalities within Boulder County about coming together and creating a streamlined affordable housing entitlements process. For us specifically, because BCHA builds in every jurisdiction within the cities in Boulder County, but even I think it would benefit not only us, but it would benefit private developers who are coming in trying to build. It could save tons of, millions of dollars, months of time, if we don't have to recreate this process with every jurisdiction. If we had sort of a baseline of, these are the base requirements. If you want to increase density, increase height above it, then there's a process, but it would save so much time. And that's something that we got out of the Housing Colorado and just our own experiences conference. So I'd love to talk more and try to see who would support that, because I think if you're just thinking about affordable housing and ways to leverage savings and time, that's a huge one.
Yeah, you're probably going to want to have talk to Joni and Glenn and Jim Angstedt too on that entitlement work, because they're the ones that are really, Joni is probably the one to talk at high level.
Okay.
And to that point, it's part of what we're going through now too.
Mm-hmm.
The piece of being on the development side that I'm learning as well, in terms of what are the pinch points. And it's interesting. I had to really get after the Chrisman group based on their based on their engineers and folks that created some chaos, simply because we said we wanted to shift from a rain garden to a traditional stormwater piece. And our water quality guy goes, hey, yeah, we can look at this, but talk to us.
Yeah.
They talked to us, they designed it, they submitted it, and created all sorts of havoc. And if they would have just talked to us, we would have went through it much faster. So yeah, Joni's in there too, because that's really the development side. And yeah, it's that'll be an interesting conversation, because if you just look at Boulder, we're like so different.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a good point. And we're doing work on it too. So I would even be happy to talk to you about what we're seeing and what we're doing.
Yeah, because we're going through that now where we're trying to build in Lafayette, and they're in the process of changing their entitlements process, and they've had a big, overturn of staff, and then, other projects within the area. It's just, it's like banging your head against the wall each time.
So we definitely, in our recent strategic planning meetings for the Regional Housing Partnership, we are definitely focusing on if there are regional issues related to affordable housing like this, that going to the partnership we're hoping that is people's, priority and first step, because we do want to work on that stuff together. And I think that's a great thing to bring forward. We are we're continuing our strategic planning for the next couple years of goals and actions in the first couple weeks of January. And then we're planning a housing summit as well. So we could chat with them about topics, and maybe this ends up being considered for a topic or something.
And what I would add to that is that we, as Molly mentioned, we have identified at least 3 areas where we think a regional administrative approach, to your point, Lauren, makes sense. And so so we will add this one, I think, to the list.
Yeah, great. I didn't mean to hijack. You guys can continue. Sorry.
That's great. That's great.
No, because the other side is this is equally important to attainable housing, because we're seeing the same issues there. And we'll keep talking about that.
And I just hope no one ever has to build rain gardens, because we ran into that at the Spoke after closing. And so we had to find $500,000 because the city decided they had to have rain gardens.
Right.
That's why I laugh when you said rain gardens, because it's a bit of a sore subject.
Yeah.
We thought there was a story.
Well, and I'll just say to everyone, one of the biggest issues we're getting into right now is water quality, because it's part of the MS4 permit that national standards create. And when you get into places like the Spoke, where you're condensed in an urban environment, you don't have the ability of creating a retention facility. And
exactly.
Yeah. All right, so partnership development. Karen, you gonna take that? Or?
Yep, I'll take that. So so these were the areas that that we had identified earlier, and related to how do we make sure that the individuals who are primarily that are living in our senior residential properties have the opportunity to be able to access services and resources, so they can live as independently as possible for as long as possible in our units. And so you can see that we've identified several action steps, and again, a lot of these were things that we had identified. We plan to do to conduct some kind of a survey or assessment of our residents about what kinds of resources do they think would be helpful. Michelle Waite is partnering on this one and has had some great ideas. There is some money that is coming through. It's a Senate Bill 290 funds that are coming through the area agencies on aging. So Colorado's going to get about $15 million of of those funds, and some of that will come to the Boulder County AAA. And so, so Michelle has submitted a proposal for bringing in some resources to the LHA properties in terms of support services. We're looking at transportation. We are looking at dog exercise areas. There's some specific criteria for use of this funding. And so we do have an active proposal, I guess, if you will, into this. So we haven't determined specifically the outcomes yet. This one, we are really probably doing some exploration in 2022 around partnerships with providers to help our older adults remain active in their in the properties. And then, as Harold had mentioned, previously, we will do some outreach and some consultation with some of the other entities that have developed some affordable assisted living units, and to see what kind of models we might want to explore. Again, we don't know what the outcomes or outputs will be at this point in time. We will add those when we get a better idea of what path we might choose. And then the last one really is around, as we consider maybe the re-syndication of Aspen Meadows neighborhood or future developments, what might we include in those developments to really address early education centers and opportunities for after-school programs for kids. So again, in that section with the partnerships, we really haven't identified many outcomes yet. We're really kind of at exploration stage at this point, and we will add those outcomes later on.
Okay. Karen, I'm looking at that initial list where you were talking about the services available to seniors. There has been an unaddressed issue in senior housing. It's been in every community I managed, and that is dealing with a senior who is developing and has dementia. And it's a very difficult process. It's a difficult process because too many elements need to be involved. But if somewhere in your looking at all of the issues with senior housing, if you can touch on that, one of the biggest problems is that when it's not addressed, and management doesn't have the right to address it, however, it affects every other resident, because they're now in the position of looking out for the one that can't take care of themselves and dealing with the delusions and illusions that come as out of that. So the pressure is on all the other residents. So there's some sort of something that needs to be addressed in terms of either easing it for the other residents or facilitating dealing with that dementia patient. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I totally understand.
Okay. All right. That's why
we have several scenarios in our properties now. So so I will call attention to that and work with Michelle on that particular area. So
all right.
Thank you for that input. And then I think the last section is really about continuing our work with developing and strengthening the culture within our residential community. So we are, I talked to Michelle a couple of days ago, and we are, I think as we had talked last month, that we are looking at a plan B to follow up on, getting broader resident input into the initial interview information that we developed earlier this summer. And our plan to bring people together in conversations was derailed a bit because of the resurgence of COVID. So we are developing our plan B to continue to reach out to residents to really work on some priorities about things that came up in the interviews that we can start implementing in 2022. So we will continue down that path and add some outcomes and outputs when we have those developed. So Cameron, I think that concludes the work that we have done on the goals and objectives and action steps for the Housing Authority for the next 5 years. If so this input and discussion has been great. We will make those modifications in the document before we take it to the Board of Commissioners. And don't know if there's other comments before we close out this particular item.
My only comment, Karen, is I think what started as a fairly broad and nebulous process seems to have really been distilled down to a set of reach goals. I mean, they're lofty in a lot of respects, but they're specific enough that you can sort of see the path as to how you actually might get there. So appreciate all that work, and from my perspective, it gives us a nice template as the advisory board to now have a guide as we evaluate other things that maybe will land on our agenda. So thanks for all the hard work.
You're welcome.
So those are our comments on this. So we'll move on to an update on the Longmont Housing Development Corporation. I didn't take the time to watch, but I saw that there was an LHA meeting yesterday where this was on the agenda. So curious to see what the board direction is.
So Harold, this one is yours. Harold and Molly.
I'm getting there. Sorry.
The LHDC update. Yeah, we didn't have anything in the packet.
Yeah. So if you hear a howling dog, I got something going on upstairs, and I can't figure it out right now. So LHDC basically. So as you know, I'm, I guess, the executive director for LHDC as well. And so we've been meeting with them recently and really working through where they want to sit in the future in terms of the board and board membership. Really, to cut to the chase, what the board, LHDC board directed us to do from the LHDC side is to begin the process of converting LHDC assets over to the Longmont Housing Authority, and essentially incorporate and acquire the Longmont Housing Authority, acquiring LHDC. And so as we work through that, we all know that AMSA was converted from LHDC to LHA as part of the resyndication. We have two projects that we'll be going through this year on that one. One is the resyndication of Village Place, which will then convert that one from LHDC to LHA. You will have heard us complain on numerous occasions about the Hearthstone and Lodge and the 202 process. So we began we're starting conversations, but this year we'll be focused on getting that out of a 202 category. Obviously, that's dependent on HUD, and then converting that into a project-based voucher facilities. Now, the important piece on that is work that Molly's doing right now. So before we go into the resyndication for Village Place, we're doing a capital needs assessment, so we really know what we need to do on that facility. We have to do the same thing for the Lodge and Hearthstone as we're looking at the conversion from the 202. HUD's going to require that. So at the end of the day, what we're really left with are three things: Spring Creek, Fall River, and then the cash assets of LHDC. And as we're starting through that, we hope that it's a pretty seamless process with the investors to just replace LHA in the role of LHDC. But then the transfer of the cash assets is really going to work with specialized legal counsel to get that converted. And so, for example, on Chrisman 1, we have Chrisman Housing Development LLC, which is a separate corporation wholly owned by LHDC that we then have to convert over to LHA. And so one of the things that we're doing that we found in some of the, on the LHDC side, is we're also including Eide Bailey in the conversations, because the way that those projects were structured, AMSA in particular, we had learned a lot of lessons on. So that the way that they were originally developed through LHDC, there were some things in place that created some tax liabilities because of how that wholly owned corporation was structured. And so we're bringing together a team. What's the attorney group? I forgot.
Brian Cave.
Brain cave.
Brian Cave, specifically Ben Doyle, who worked with the County Housing Authority and helped them through this process. So we're working with them, Eide Bailey, to begin this transfer over into LHA. If you all remember when Betsy Martin or Martins?
I think there's an
Martins.
S on the end. Martins.
Yeah,
Martins,
Martins.
yeah. When she did the report for us and we said, well, where do we go? One of the things at the top of her list was really the consolidation of LHA and LHTC, because what that really does is strengthen the financial position of both organizations. So if you all remember when we got into the budget process, when we started, we were financially in a tough spot. What's interesting is we have corrected that because the development cycle wasn't active. We're now seeing the same issue that we dealt with on LHA starting to impact LHDC. So when you combine these assets, what you really do is take two organizations that are not fundamentally financially stable and creating a financially stable organization in this process. So that's what we're looking at. Karen, Molly, did I miss anything?
I think that was it.
And the Board of Commissioners, you know, said continue to move forward. So just a confirmation, you know, that this is the path we're headed, and stop us now because that's where we're going. So we got consensus from the Board of Commissioners.
How long of a process is this going to be?
Could be up to a year and a half, depending on all of the issues that you have to get into. We think we can do it faster, but I'm hesitant right now to say that we can do it faster because we just don't know what we're going to get into legally. I mean, this is going to be a lot of work, and don't be surprised when you start seeing legal bills coming in this, because I mean, this is a time. There's going to be a lot of time in this, and it's expensive per hour, but you have to make sure you get it right, or you'll see a big tax liability on the backside of it in 6 digits, which we saw on the LHDC side. So. So Cameron, we're now also playing attorneys at times too.
Wonderful. Well, I think, I mean, this was an inevitable process. We kind of saw this writing on the wall some time ago. I think from my perspective, we keep moving forward, and thanks for the update. Anything else on this from the advisory board? All right, let's move on to Prosper Longmont, which I've heard a little bit about, but maybe in
yeah. So generally, and Cameron can probably help me on this because we're not in all of the meetings at the city, but generally, Prosper Longmont was an initiative that I think was really started out of members of the Longmont Economic Development Partnership, and then a group of people that are beyond that partnership, and residents of our community that represent different components of our organization. And what they're really focused on is attainable housing. And so to put it into perspective, we all know that from Longmont Housing Authority perspective, on home ownership, it's affordable home ownership is 80%, 79% below AMI, and then on rental, it's 60% below AMI. And so that's kind of our niche on the affordable world. What we're looking at is the attainable housing component. And that is what I would say is 80 to 120% AMI. Kathy and I think Molly's been part of these conversations, we're actually going, is 80 to 90 even attainable when you look at land prices and construction prices today. So part of, I think, what we want to look at in this housing analysis is also to look at that, because we may as staff have to come in and go, we've been defining it as 80 to 120% AMI. It may actually need to be 90 to 130% AMI is attainable, and affordable is 89% and below because of what we're just seeing in terms of the cost of construction of housing. Part of what they've also looked at is things that Lauren mentioned in terms of the entitlement process and what does that look like, and we see it too. Time is money, and how can we facilitate and streamline that? And so those are some of the things that we talked about. I know Eric, who is, I believe, the chair of Eric Wallace, you know, one of the things we're all interested in is, did we get the grant to look at the housing piece? And at the last meeting, it's like, we haven't heard, then we heard. So all of these things are coming together, but their niche is really going to be that attainable world. Cameron, do you have anything to add?
I don't think so. I was just going to ask you your perspective on what role the housing authority might have in that. Do we just stay in our own lane? Is there some overlap? What do you think?
I think the overlap occurs in kind of what we talked about with Lauren, is really the development process, because there are common areas of interest there. So, you know, I will give you like Chrisman 2. We ran into a quagmire based on the local development standards in terms of green space and amenities. And so from a land development code perspective, we say we want multifamily housing to be in areas that are located near where people can walk to get groceries, shop, do all of those things, and have it accessible to transit. So then our development standards required green space and amenities. And when we brought in HUD funds, they have a decibel level that you can't exceed if you're going to use HUD funding, which is 65 decibels. And what we've learned in this process is, if you take our land development code issues and you then try to find a place that meets the land development side and HUD requirements for shopping and transit, you will probably not find a place with that is under 65 decibels on the exterior. So we couldn't fund some things. So we got into a crazy process of having to see what works. And so I think there's common areas of interest on that in terms of the development side and what we require, up to and even including landscaping requirements. And so when we look at our landscaping ordinance, it's going to touch 3 areas. It's going to touch the impact and the cost to affordable, attainable housing, and are we meeting our sustainability goals in terms of water conservation and things like that. Typically on any project, when you get into landscaping, you're looking at a minimum, I would say, of about $250,000 based on some of our standards. To put it in perspective, and Cameron knows this, when we were looking at the Costco development, and because it's on a scenic entry corridor, I think the landscaping cost on that, of which affordable housing has a component of this, is about $750,000. And so those are the things I think where there's common areas of interest. Outside of that, it's kind of hard when we look at all of these funding sources, especially the use of federal funds, because it is restricted to 80% or 60% AMI and below. So there's not necessarily the crossover there, unless the city council wants to start looking at creating some capacity within the affordable housing fund and the local dollars. But that's a much broader conversation. I don't know if that answered your question, Cameron.
No, I think it does. And one distinction that's important to make, and maybe something we wrestle with in the future, or the board wrestles with in the future, is that what Prosper Longmont is more of an advocacy group. They're not actually going to do anything other than communicate. We're different than that, or the LHA is different than that. And so if the attainable housing goals are going to be implemented, there's going to have to be private development that implements it, or a city that implements it, or some combination of public-private. And so the LHA may have a role in that. I don't know, it's worth exploring.
Yeah. I
Any
think
other
part,
thought, or go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think part of it is we don't know, and we're gonna be learning our way process on the attainable side.
Is the goal for LHA in the future to do more self-development instead of looking to partner with other developers like Element?
You know, honestly, I would probably not recommend looking at self-development, because when you're having to build the capital stacks and you're looking at your debt ratios, I think as long as you can leverage others, and if we're able to create an agreement similar to what we did with Chrisman, that makes more sense financially. So to give you an example, in that agreement as it stands, we will assume operation of the property within 5 years, and we will have ownership of the property by 2028. Literally only putting in $2 to $2.5 million, versus if you're trying to build the entire capital stack and have that debt on there, that changes the total amount. And so, if you can find the right partners and construct it in a way to have a similar agreement where you're on a really less than 10-year time frame of assuming operational control and ownership, to me that starts making more sense than trying to build and manage all of these projects. What I did forget to tell you all earlier is we're putting about $500,000 into the ARPA funds to hire a development
Coordinator.
finance specialist to assist in helping Molly and adding staff capacity to manage these projects operationally. And then my goal is to start incorporating that ongoing funding. So it starts out as a term position, but then we incrementally step into creating a permanent position to do some of these things and help facilitate those kind of projects.
Yeah, because there's, I mean, I'm only managing 2 projects right now, and
Yep.
it's a lot of work, Harold.
Yep.
I feel for you because you guys got a lot coming up. So,
Yep.
Okay.
So if you
And
know
then
anybody,
Yeah.
send them our way.
I do actually know a few people who are interested, so I'll let
Oh,
them
good.
know to keep an eye out. Another question I had about just like future development was, like you had mentioned, for affordable housing, you want to have food nearby. You don't want to be located in a food desert. I don't know if you guys are aware of the grocery store that DHA, Denver Housing Authority, just opened, Decatur Fresh. I mean, and at the Spoke, we have a commercial space that we're going to lease out for $1 a year to a nonprofit or some sort of organization. Is that something that we could look to incorporating into some future developments, especially if someone else is doing the development side? Because it takes a lot more money than you can't use LIHTC for. But that could be something, if we have land that's doesn't have that walkability, maybe we can look at some of those partnerships.
Yeah, that's actually where we could use our local funding if we wanted to do that.
Mhm.
Part of the challenge that and just so everyone knows that I also have Joni working on, is really looking at available land to develop. because the other reality for us as a community and all of these conversations that both impacts Prosper and this is the developable land that we actually have in our community, because we have all of the IGAs and the super IGAs in terms of really restricting what we can annex as a community. And so, you know, I think the first thing we need to answer is, what land do we have that we can develop? What are the development constraints on it? And then how many units can we put in place? So the example, the easiest example is that we have a large chunk off of 66 in Hover that was originally contemplated to be a much larger development. Boulder County then purchased some open space there. So then what happened is it reduced the footprint. And when you look at the stormwater issues on it, all of a sudden it's hard for anyone to come in and develop a pro forma for that property that can handle the stormwater issues on it. So we're going to start doing all of that. The other component is we also have to preserve the land that we have zoned for economic development for potential economic growth. So they're working on that now to kind of help us set the basis for the conversation, because we may come in and go, we need 7,000 units, but if we only have land to develop 4,000, so then you go into your land development code and start looking at, well, what can you do from density in terms of condos and things like that, and really start having a legitimate conversation about height in certain areas of the community. So
Yeah, because I mean, if you start stacking LIHTC and like new market tax credits, you could put economic on the bottom and then build housing up top.
right.
So that would be great. And do we know what's happened? I had my eye on the sugar mill property for so long. Do we know what's going to happen with that property? I know that's been a big discussion going on about this STREAM acronym that I don't quite understand. But is housing sort of, does anyone have an eye on housing for that piece of land?
Yeah, that's a group that's interested in that property. Part of the challenge on the sugar mill is you have to, you know, in any acquisition, you have to have a willing buyer and a willing seller.
Mhm.
The first time we think we actually have someone that may be able to get it done. And they're partnering with the city. So we've been working, we had an EPA grant to do phase 2 because it's a brownfield, which will then identify what cleanup we have to do. And then we'll go for a brownfield cleanup grant next on that.
And are there any buckets of funding for putting housing where there were those issues?
Potentially,
Okay,
but you have to get it cleaned up first.
yeah.
We're waiting on that right now. We're waiting on that phase 2. That's really on the outer edges of the team's really focused in what I would say. So think of Martin Street to the Kim Pratt Bridge, and in that area, and council has talked about really increased density and height in that location because it's not adjacent to any neighborhoods.
Mhm.
So we're really trying to understand that. But that then comes into a property acquisition and how do we facilitate those conversations?
And is that where the Costco is going to go?
No,
Over in
Costco is actually off of 119, adjacent to Harvest Junction. So if you look at that,
Okay, yeah. Mhm.
it's just
Okay.
to the east of that,
Okay, next to Walmart.
right?
Okay.
Roland, anything else on Prosper, Longmont, or development related things before we move to 4D, which is the role of the advisory board? All right, let's jump into that. Other than interesting conversation, what are we supposed to do?
Have an interesting conversation. I think we just wanted to check in. This is the first year of our advisory board structure. And so we just wanted to check in to see if the advisory board had any comments about what you would like to see your role be in the future, ideas that you have as we, I would say probably in our January meeting, we would bring back kind of work plan, for lack of a better word. So we just thought it would be a good time to check in about how it's been going and what you would like to see in the future as it relates to the advisory board and your role. And if you don't have anything, fine. We just wanted to create that opportunity for discussion.
Are we gonna continue having council members like liaisons, or is that separated now?
Good question. I think it's separated now because of their role.
Okay. I did like having sort of that connection, kind of knowing more what's going on. What they're
We
thinking.
do, you know, between Harold and Karen and Molly and Kathy and everyone else, we get a pretty good connection to what's going on, and the council's very up to speed because now they have to be the board. But I do kind of miss that, but I see the reason for it. Let me give some real quick comments on this. I'm a big fan of structure, just so I kind of understand what we're supposed to be doing. I really like the idea of taking this, the LHA goals and objectives, having that sort of set out as our template for the types of things that we're evaluating. And in terms of our work plan, I could see us on a simple level, hearing the city report, you know, the update on what's going on, and then our role would then be to identify any perceived gaps between the goals and objectives and what we see actually happening, just to make sure we're on course. I think second would be updates on new projects, and again, assessing how they align with the goals that are set out. And then the third would be a little more freeform ideas and suggestions on what we might do that's not on our radar. And then we'll stay out of everything else. Anyone else have thoughts that would help the team figure out how to start building a work plan for us for January?
I mean, do we want to act more like, you know how the planning commission reviews projects and then gives a recommendation to council or whoever? Would that be something we want to do, where we're reviewing proposals or projects and maybe finding things that are missing, or not that we would be the decision maker, but that we could review them ahead of time? I don't know, does that add that one more layer of red tape that we hate? Would it be optional? Does anybody have any interest in doing that?
So I'd say that the value that I want to make sure what we're doing is adding value to the activities that the board is involved in. And one thing that we have is a little more time, ability to maybe dig a little deeper into these things than the city council members who have an awful lot on their plate. And so, if we're ahead of the curve, it'd be nice to see items that are anticipated to be on the LHA board's agenda in the future come through us for kind of a check-in. We look at how they compare to our goals and objectives. We evaluate it and make a recommendation, or at least provide comments to the board so that they have that as they then evaluate. And,
Yeah, that's
just
kind of
like
what I'm
planning commission,
thinking.
they don't have to follow it, but at least it's a little bit more information for them.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought process, is giving them more information, a bigger picture, to avoid them having a lot of questions to come back and then delay projects, things like that. Because I do like the idea of knowing ahead of time what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, and with an ambitious set of goals and objectives, the more we can do to help speed things along and streamline it, the better. That sound reasonable? Karen, Harold, others?
I think that does, and I think if what I'm understanding is that now that we have a pretty solid set of goals and objectives for the next 5 years, that really would be our the North Star of our efforts and what we bring back to to the advisory board. So I think that works, and we have a proposed format, and certainly continuing down the path with having a chance for and taking advantage of the advisory board's consultation around topics that would be coming up for a Board of Commissioners meeting is what we try to do. We sometimes get off schedule, but we have an opportunity to be on schedule for 2022. That's our goal. So I think this works fine unless Harold or Molly have other questions.
No, the only thing, Karen, we may want to look at is, for example, on development projects, because there's so much proprietary information, if needed, if we could do an executive session to ensure that, we can maybe talk through some of these things in the development phase early on, that we can't have in a public setting.
Right.
So
What I'd like to do is avoid it being another place that our very busy team has to show up and tell us what they've already told the LHA without us doing anything about it. So just want to have our time be meaningful and helpful.
Got it. I appreciate that.
Well, on that note, let's roll over to when our very busy team just tells us what they've already told the LHA, the city report.
Well, and I realize that we are about 8 minutes out from our end time. So I don't know if you, so we have Lisa and Kendra on the call, if you want them to make a report or just respond to questions. So that's.
I would say if there are any really notable highlights to share, anything unusual that has happened since we last talked about it, great. Otherwise, we'll just open it up for questions. Kendra, do you have something?
So I would only say that we're in pretty good shape on all the properties. We've increased our revenue. We've decreased our expenses pretty much on all of the properties by either doing better management for maintenance, doing this stuff on our own instead of actually calling a third party to have it fixed. We've had differences in our cable bills. We've switched to TV satellite, which made a huge difference in cost. We have had some anomalies, obviously, with staff, ups and downs with staff. So hopefully that'll get stabilized in the next year. We did have, some issues with the AMSA project where there was a seller carryback note done instead of receiving revenue. So that required LHDC to pay full tax on those proceeds. They will eventually get that money, but it's in a seller carryback note. So that's one of the big things that kind of happened within the last couple months. And, it's also noticeable on the LHA, I don't believe they were actually budgeting for their reserves, which is something that you do want to dive into with HUD. They give you a certain budget amount, but they also give you reserves. So if we're not budgeting for that, then you're not actually issuing the vouchers and spending the money. So you'll see we have increased grant amount coming in. We also have increased expenditures on the LHA Consolidated report. That is, I think, two things. One, we didn't quite know how the HCV program worked and how to budget for it back in the last budget cycle. And this year, actually trying to dive into the reserves. So that's kind of my analysis in a nutshell.
Right.
I just have a
Delete.
couple of I just have a couple of questions. On your budget, I noticed that it lists the balance as of 10/31. So is that correct? We're about 2 months behind.
That is, because right now we're actually working on finalizing November. So
Okay,
there are a lot of journal entry transactions that we have to do for the November financials, so they're not quite complete yet. So that's why we're always we're really a month behind. And so that's how it'll always be. You'll always be a month behind when I give these.
okay. And then my next question is, I know that last night when I was tuned into the meeting, that you guys talked about the money that is going to be written off. Is that amount that's at the bottom of the page, the 36,000, going to come off the balance at the top?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, so
So-
as shadows in, that's 34,000 or 3,400 will come off of the 8,400.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep. All of those balances are in there. So yeah, we're going to be bringing those down.
good.
Do we have an allowance for doubtful accounts at all, or is this just?
So the biggest one that we do an allowance for doubtful accounts is the suites. So we do have an allowance on that project. The other ones are so minimal usually by the end of the year, they're not. Once we get this caught up, we do have, the plan to have a process in place so that we can work on this bad debt structure and make sure that we're getting it to collections in time. But I think this will help the community managers on their delinquencies and get them better reporting so they can hone in on what's really, really, truly late and not trying to ask them for 2018 costs that they were never asked for before.
And how much was the taxes on the gain that we had to pay? Was it about 600,000, I imagine?
Yeah, it was about 400 for federal and a little over 100,000 for state.
And you said we're gonna get that back eventually? Is that like a 1 to 2 years type thing, or?
Well, so that is on a priority schedule. So with AMSA, what usually happens is they have this priority. So you pay this loan first, you pay this loan next, and until you get those paid off, I think it's probably in 4th or 5th position. So, we'll pay the developer fees first. That's usually always what falls first, or if there's any other loans that are required to be in higher priority. But it'll get paid back to LHA now instead of LHDC, since we're trying to transition stuff. So we moved that seller carryback note to be on LHA instead.
And that's a lesson learned. So when they had the group that was building AMSA, you need to have your auditors in there with them so that you can structure it appropriately so you don't have that tax liability. So that's why you hear us say Eid Bailey is going to be with this on this one, because that was the piece that, and we frankly had to try to figure out what was going on, because that was the front end of the project and the development of it, that where this thing started going in a different direction.
Any other questions? As I not to douse your enthusiasm, but we have 1 more minute on our predetermined time. Arlene?
I just have a question. I'll make it really fast. According to the news, and I know that it is always accurate, they indicated that Paulus is looking at the possibility of the COVID vaccine requirement being 3 shots instead of the 2. Do you know anything further on that?
The CDC still hasn't changed the recommendation on it. And so typically what we've said from a policy perspective is CDC, Department of Public, Colorado Department of Public Health, Boulder County Health, in that order. And so CDC hasn't changed their recommendation.
Okay.
Cameron? Cameron?
Go ahead.
Yeah, this would be under other business, I think, and I'll be as quick as I can. When Kinder was talking, and looking over the data, I am concluding that there's no rent increase this year. Is that true?
I
That
don't
no
think we
rent
did-
increase.
I don't think we did a rent increase, but what we did do is we did up our fair market rent percentage. From
The fair
9%
market, yeah, but
Yes.
overall, it won't be a blanket, 4% increase across the board. That isn't happening.
I don't think one was done, correct, Lisa?
Yeah, well, we haven't received any notice, and I
Right.
didn't know if rules had changed and what have you. We can, the rumor is there's no rent increase, right?
And
Correct.
I think that-
We did not ask for one for this year.
Yeah.
We are, for new move-ins, we'll have the new market, a higher rent, but not current residents.
But not current, okay, yeah, that's cool. Okay, that's one. And two, October 1st, state of Colorado passed the law that property managers cannot assess late fees until after the 7th day of the month. Our leases say 5th. Is that being addressed? Because, yeah.
You should have received a notice last week.
Nope.
You did not?
Nope.
Okay, I will follow up. Notices were
Okay.
sent to the property managers last week with the new changes and the
Okay.
cap on the late fees as well.
Okay. So, all right, so that the 7-day thing is covered in that. All right.
Correct.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. Seeing,
So I just
or-
one
I'm
other
sorry.
comment. So the LHA occupancy availability report, I do like how we have a new kind of setting where we have the down units now, so we could see that if there is any of those unfortunate meth units that come about.
We still have those two, so.
Yeah. That are still outstanding. So how long are those going to be down, you think? Another month or two, or is that hard to say?
It's hard to say with the suites. We have to find a construction company who can come in at a reasonable price, because right now they're coming in at over twice the amount that insurance has stated. And part of it's the inflation, but we are working on getting 2 other companies in there. We were just put on a hold because of the outbreak at the suites with COVID. So we couldn't have any vendors going in and out.
So that's actually a great question. Right now, just across the board, small projects generally are getting hammered in bids because there's also a labor issue that, we've all seen it, the labor issue that's in play. And so it really is going to be a real-time evaluation of what's the cost of, if it's a $40,000 project and they're charging you $100,000, assessing that versus what is the revenue loss and figuring out what's the best financial decision. And that's part of the challenge that we're facing.
If we're holding units vacant, that doesn't have any funding implications, does it?
From a revenue standpoint, it does.
Yeah, okay.
It's seeing no other questions. Let's roll on to other business. Anything else for the good of the discussion today?
So I think, Cameron, I just want to mention a couple things. I think we talked a little bit about it, but the LHA commissioners, Board of Commissioners last night, did take action to approve the write-offs of bad debt. They approved the 2022 budget. They did increase the fair market rent to 100% of the HUD fair market rent that was issued in October, and did increase our utility allowance. So they did take those actions, which we will put into place for for January and beyond. And I think the other thing I just want to announce is that Molly O'Donnell is officially our new Housing and Community Investment Division Director. So you may or may not know that Kathy Fedler is going to be retiring. She's retiring at the end of January. Molly has been officially appointed in that position, and they have about 6 weeks or so for continuing to work together. Obviously, Kathy and Molly have been working together over the past many years. But anyhow, so just want you to know that is official as of a week ago Monday, that Molly is assuming that new role with the city.
Congratulations, Molly.
Thank you. And thank you, Karen, for introducing me. I'm looking forward to carrying this forward. I'm here for the long haul, and I'm looking forward to partnership with all of you.
You're looking forward to it as well. All right, with no other business, I'm going to declare the meeting adjourned, and I will see you all next year.
Bye,
Have a
everybody.
fabulous
Happy
holiday.
holidays.
You too.